Welcome, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to the LEAD Center's webinar on service provider transformation from policy to opportunity. We're very excited about this webinar today. This is Rebecca Salon. I'm the project director for LEAD Center. I wanted to go over some housekeeping details so that everyone can fully participate. So in listening to the webinar, if you don't have sound capabilities on your computer or prefer to listen by phone, we've provided you with numbers that you can call in. There's a 415 number as well as a 855 number that is a toll-free number. You do need to put in the meeting code, but you do not need an attendee ID to be able to participate. Real-time captioning is provided during this webinar. The captions can be found in the media viewer panel, which appears in the lower right corner of the webinar platform. If you want to make the media viewer panel larger, you can minimize other panels like chat, question and answer, and/or participants. We encourage you to submit questions. Please use the Q&A box to submit any questions you have during the webinar, and we will direct the questions accordingly during the Q&A portion of the webinar. If you're listening by phone and not logged into the webinar, you may also ask questions by emailing them to Brittany Taylor at btaylor@ndi-inc.org. Please note that this webinar is being recorded, and the materials will be placed on the LEAD Center website at the link provided. We'll also provide that link in the chat box so that you'll be able to access it there. If you experience any technical difficulties during the webinar, please use the chat box to send a message to the host. That'll go directly to Brittany Taylor, or you also may email her. Again, her email address is btaylor@ndi-inc.org. For those of you who are unfamiliar with the LEAD Center, we are the National Center on Leadership for the Employment and Economic Advancement of People with Disabilities. LEAD Center is a collaborative of disability, workforce, and economic empowerment organizations led by National Disability Institute and funded by the Office of Disability Employment Policy at the U.S. Department of Labor. Our mission is to advance sustainable individual and systems-level change that results in improved competitive integrated employment and economic self-sufficiency outcomes for people across the spectrum of disability. So without further ado, I'd like to turn the webinar over to Amy Gonzalez. Amy is Senior Policy Advisor at the Office of Disability Employment Policy with the Workforce Systems Policy Team. Amy will introduce the moderator and talk some about the webinar. Amy? Amy, you may be muted.
There we go.
Okay. You're unmuted. Hi, thanks. Take it away, Amy.
Thank you very much, Rebecca. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar that will focus on provider transformation. This afternoon, you will get the opportunity to hear from Tennessee, who has been working under the Employment First State Leadership Mentoring Program to focus on holistic systems change. We will get to hear different perspectives on today's webinar, ranging from the state perspective, the community rehabilitation provider perspective, the employer perspective, and we will also hear from an individual supported by St. John's Community Services that is in competitive integrated employment. I am certain that the audience will get the opportunity to learn and engage in a rich discussion upon conclusion of the webinar. So we are very much looking forward to learning with you today. What I'm going to do now is turn it over to the moderator, DiBiase, Corey has been a national subject matter expert and has worked with ODEP on various initiatives focused on increasing competitive integrated employment for people with disabilities. So Corey, take it away. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Amy, and thank you so much to everyone at the Office of Disability Employment Policy, both for helping facilitate this event and for facilitating the entire Employment First State Leadership Mentoring Program, which has spawned so much great innovation and change in the field. And there's not much I can add to what Amy said. We're really excited to be able to present this webinar. This is based in part on an issues brief that Social Dynamics and its partners prepared as part of the Employment First State Leadership Mentoring Program on the issue of provider transformation, and it looks specifically at Tennessee, who we're going to be talking to today, as well as Iowa. And it had that same focus, as Amy mentioned, of looking from the starting from the policy perspective on the state level and working all the way through to the individual impacts of these kinds of changes and the importance of these kinds of changes to both employers and employees and job seekers. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to the folks who will speak to us today from the Tennessee perspective. I'm going to hand it over to Jeremy Nordenpaul, who's the State Director of Employment and Day Services with the Tennessee Department of Intellectual and Developmental Disabilities. So again, Amy and the folks at ODEP, thanks so much. And Jeremy, please take it away.
Thank you, Corey, so much. Can y'all hear me? Take that as a yes.
Yes.
Well, first I wanted to say thank you to the Lead Center, Social Dynamics, and ODEP for bringing us together for this important conversation today. And also a huge thank you to everyone who's been able to attend this webinar. I know it's no easy feat to take time out of your day to commit to a training or a webinar, so a sincere thanks to you. Provider transformation is a topic that we know gets a lot of attention. A lot of different calls and webinars and presentations are dedicated to this topic, and for good reason too, right? It's a really important topic. And I think this webinar is unique because we're going to start very zoomed out at the federal and state policy level, and then gradually zoom our way in to hear about how the Employment First movement is impacting real people in their everyday lives. So as I like to say, we're going to look at both the forest and the trees. And also, as I share some perspectives from Tennessee, please know that there is no one right way to go about employment first in your states, and we know that. And we know that in reality, we continue to learn lessons every single day about what we can do to make things better and to make things stronger. So I just hope that this is a helpful snapshot of how our state has approached employment first at the systems and policy level, and also how that has impacted the lives of Tennesseans with disabilities across the state. And I always like to start conversations and presentations about employment first with this slide, with this diagram, even though some people who know me well might get sick of hearing about it, but I think it's great. Author and TED Talk speaker Simon Sinek coined this diagram, which he calls the golden circle. And really it's a very, very simple idea, and that's when we're doing really hard work, trying to change enormous systems, we need to root ourselves firmly in the center of that circle with the question, why? And then work our way up from there. Because if you're anything like me, as soon as I see a problem or a challenge, I instantly start thinking about how I'm going to fix it and what it's going to look like once I'm done fixing it and how great it's going to be once I'm done fixing it. But the downside of that, of course, is it skips over the incredibly important question of why we're wanting to do that in the first place. Why do we want to fix it in the first place? So let me ask this question, and it's mostly rhetorical, but since we have this neat chat function here, feel free to type your answer if you've got one in the chat box as I talk. Why is employment so important? Why do we care so much about employment? So I'll kind of keep an eye on the chat box as y'all are typing if you have any answers. But I wanted to say that there are a lot of different reasons that resonate with me and motivate me every single day to do this work. Number one, I know that work plays a tremendous role in our lives. It helps us build relationships, establish financial independence, have a sense of integrity, feel a contribution to society. I also look at the employment rates across the country. I look at the in employment rates for people without disabilities, and it's something like 95% in the working age population across our country. And then we look at the same statistic for people with disabilities, and it hovers somewhere around 20%. So when I look at those two numbers, 95% and 25%, and see that enormous gap, 75% gap in employment rates, it's a huge motivating factor for me to want to be involved in this work. I also look at employment as a key public health determinant in fancy talk, but more simply put, people who are employed are healthier, and the more healthy people you have in a community, the healthier the community is as a whole. And I see someone who chatted in here that says employment gives people purpose, it gives us value. You're absolutely right. I couldn't agree more. We also know that employment is critical to addressing poverty and helping empower people to lift themselves out of poverty. It's a natural win-win situation for individuals in the business community. So really the takeaway here is that there's many different reasons why you and why we should care about employment and why it resonates so strongly with you. And I encourage all of us to think about those reasons and to keep it close to you, whether you want to write it on a sticky note, put it on a poster on your wall like I have at work, or on your mirror at home, somewhere that's going to constantly remind you of why you care so much about this work and to invigorate you when you need it the most. And from a legal standpoint, there are many other reasons why Employment First is such an important movement. And I'm not going to go into very much detail about any of these things because most of you are probably very familiar already with them, and also they're easy enough to Google if you want to learn more information. But, you know, Americans with Disability Act of 1990, huge landmark legislation, in essence prohibited discrimination based on disability in any setting across the country. The second one up there is the Olmstead versus LC, as you may know, a landmark Supreme Court decision from 1999, which essentially said that people with disabilities have a right to receive publicly funded services in the most integrated community settings possible. And then, of course, most recently, we have the HCBS Final Settings Rule, the Home and Community-Based Services Final Settings Rule, which did a lot of different things, and I'm sure you've been to lots of different webinars and presentations about that. But a couple really important things in this context is that it talked a lot about the person-centered planning process and talked about what role that person-centered planning process plays in how we deliver services to people to make sure that it's based on what people truly desire in their lives. And it also increased the protections that people have in their home and community-based settings relating to where a person receives those services to ensure that they're provided in a true community environment. And lastly on this slide, and actually is one of my favorite, is that we can look back in history and see that employment, in my opinion, is interwoven into the very fabric of our country, and therefore is fundamentally a matter of civil rights. So this right here is a quote, of course, from our Declaration of Independence in 1776. And you're probably familiar with the famous quote about life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. Well, I believe, and I think a lot of people do, that having access to a job gives you the opportunity to live a fulfilling life. And having a job allows you the opportunity to choose your path and to have liberty in doing so. And of course, having a job allows you to earn the dignity, respect, and money which help create a sense of happiness. So in a way, I'm here, and a lot of us are here because I think of myself as a defender of civil rights with and alongside people with disabilities. And when I read that word all in that preamble of the Declaration of Independence, I really think that it means all. All right, so I'm not going to read these definitions to you because you're very familiar with them. One is from ODEP and the second is from APSE. I'm looking at this slide. I want to make sure that they're the right way. One of them is from ODEP, one from APSE. And really the important point is that Employment First establishes the simple and frankly it's beautiful in its audacity, the goal that people with disability should have the same exact access to employment opportunities as people without disabilities. And we know that the workforce system was by and large designed by people without disabilities, so it is absolutely our collective responsibility to ensure that we are working within the system to push the boundaries of the system to make it accessible to everyone. And as you may know, there are about 46 states, if I'm correct, that have currently any Employment First activity at all, and about 32 of them that have a formal policy action such as an executive order or a legislative mandate. So now I'm going to spend just a couple of minutes talking about how we catalyzed the Employment First movement here in Tennessee. And believe it or not, Tennessee was among the very first states to declare ourselves an employment first state way back in the early 2000s, but there were several other things that needed to align before we could put that verbal declaration into any sort of substantive action. So first, we spent a significant amount of time ensuring there was commitment in different departments and stakeholder groups to actually want to change the service delivery system. I mean, that goes back to the question of why. We wanted to make sure that people were tapping into the reasons why we wanted to make that change to the delivery system. And it's surprisingly easy to get carried away with employment first actions and strategies without spending enough time informing people and actually cultivating that buy-in. But once we had confirmed that we had enough buy-in from a critical mass of key departments and stakeholder groups, we joined ODEP's Employment First State Leadership Mentor Program in 2012. And at the time, the program was pretty new and essentially matched protege states up with mentor states. Washington State was our mentor state, and Tennessee was the protege state. EFSLMP, as that program is called, has since transformed over the years and continues to provide technical assistance to a lot of different states, including Tennessee now in 2017. And on the bottom of this slide, you'll see a list. It's not exhaustive, but it just lists some of the key groups that we were talking about that we needed to get at the table and to cultivate buy-in from to get employment first off the ground in the first place. So after we spent all that time cultivating that buy-in, getting the right people at the table, and becoming a protege state with ODEP in 2012, that set the stage for us for the next big action, which was in June of 2013, Governor Haslam signed Executive Order number 28, which did three important things. First, it declared officially Tennessee to be an employment first state and actually put executive backing behind it. And second, it called for the creation of an employment first task force, which meets quarterly to address the barriers that people with disabilities face getting into the workforce, and to not only that, but come up with creative solutions to overcome those barriers. And third, it called for the task force to create and present an annual report that summarizes our progress over the past year, and that's called the Expect Employment Report. And if I'm not mistaken, that is included in the resources for today's webinar. So feel free to check that out. We produce one every year, and it's just a really great snapshot of all of the work all of our different stakeholders have accomplished over the last year. Now, Executive Order 28 set a really strong vision for where we want to take our state and where we want to take the state of our workforce system. And remember, of course, that we're rooted firmly in why we want to get there in the first place. But then in 2013, we had to have something to tell us how to actually get there, you know, a roadmap of sorts. So what we did is we wrote a strategic plan in 2013. And the important note there is, you know, there's nothing revolutionary about having a strategic plan. A lot of people have them, but we wanted to make sure that it was a useful, living, breathing document, and it wasn't going to be something we would just type up to check a box and then convert to a PDF and put on a shelf somewhere. But it's actually something that I literally carry around with me, not only in soft copy on my computer, but also in hard copy in my bag, so that when I'm at meetings and different conversations with people, I am constantly referencing our strategic plan. I'm writing all over it. I'm making changes to it. I want to make sure that it is actually a helpful roadmap on our journey. And actually, we most recently updated it in 2017 to reflect all of our current progress and challenges. So it's a very useful document to us, and I highly recommend anyone on the employment first journey to have a very strong strategic plan. And along the way, we've also formalized a lot of our partnerships with other state agencies through memorandums of understanding, MOUs, which, as you probably know, helps streamline services and clear up confusion about who delivers what service, who pays for what, how individuals are served by one or more systems, things like that. And you see kind of a list here, and I won't go into too much detail, but feel free to contact me if you want, but I'll just make two notes about these MOUs. For the Transitioning Youth MOU, I wanted to say that it actually took us a couple of years to formalize that because we had to go through so many different deliberations and legal channels, but it is hugely important for how students and young adults are served by our systems in Tennessee as they transfer from system to system especially. And the other note I wanted to make is that the MOU between VR and the Department of Mental Health and Substance Abuse Services is currently being developed as we speak with the support of the Employment First State Leadership Mentor Program through ODEP. All right, so, oh, it didn't click. There we go. This is just a snapshot of the different stakeholder groups that help make Employment First a reality in Tennessee. I really like this slide. So, of course, what's underpinning all of this, of course, is our partnership with ODEP and involvement in the Employment First State Leadership Mentor Program. And so other things that underpin all this work is that we have our Employment First Task Force, which is made up of different work groups doing the different work. We have a Tennessee Works partnership, which is housed at Vanderbilt Kennedy Center, one of our state's 2 USEDs, which does a lot of things, including providing access to research and grants and other amazing resources. We have an employment roundtable, which is administered by our Developmental Disabilities Council, and that was the group that was responsible for drafting the youth MOU. And the logos that you see on this screen are really neat because they show all the different state departments that are at the table, who literally sit around the table at these meetings, participating in work groups and being a part of these conversations. And the note I'll make here is that the most recent additions to our partnership have been ABLE Tennessee, which is a program that you might be familiar with. It's a program of the Department of Treasury. Also, the Department of Transportation has been a recent addition as we talked more about transportation being a barrier for folks with disabilities. And also very excited about the Department of Economic and Community Development, which represents sort of the business side of the equation when we're talking about creating employment opportunities for people with disabilities. So again, there's no one right way of doing things, and we certainly have our challenges that we face on a daily basis, but this is just a snapshot of what things look like in Tennessee. And now the last thing that I'll share with you before I hand it over to Dwayne to talk more about things at the provider level is that at the department level, in my department, DIDD, we needed about a year, I guess over the past 6 months to a year, we realized that we needed a way of ensuring that all the work that we're doing all over the place, all the different amazing strategies and meetings and action steps and all that good stuff, with limited time and resources, we needed a way of making sure that it was being done in the best, most efficient way possible and that we were being good stewards of taxpayer dollars. And also that we're being very specific and intentional about the outcomes that we're hoping to see as a result of all those things. So this is not a revolutionary framework. It's just a very high-level summary framework that summarizes how we view our department's role in moving the employment first needle, so to speak. And the different parts that you see on the left, the different drivers or inputs are largely interdependent, so it's hard to be successful with one if we're only addressing one or two of them. You really have to be addressing all these different things. And I won't go into extreme detail about all of them. I'd be very happy to talk to you in more detail if you'd like to contact me separately. But just very briefly, when we talk about rate structure, we're thinking about ways that we can incentivize employment outcomes through our reimbursement structure, the way that we're reimbursing providers. When we talk about technical assistance, we are thinking about whether our provider agencies have access to consulting through our department, especially as they're making that transition from facility-based to employment and community-based services. With communities of practice, we think a lot about webinars and calls and different forums where stakeholders are coming together regularly to develop community and camaraderie and things like that. Of course, with communication, we think about how we're sharing in a very clear way updates and progress and success stories, also how we're gathering and incorporating stakeholder input across the board. With capacity building, we think about provider agencies and other folks who have access to different trainings and things like customized employment, supported employment, things like that. Of course, with interagency coordination, we're thinking about how we are participating in different stakeholder groups like the ones I mentioned before, and also formalizing partnerships through memorandums of understanding to streamline our services. We also think about leadership development. That's a really tricky one, but we think about ways that we are or aren't cultivating leadership, not only within our own department, but also in the provider agencies across the state. We know that one of the most challenging things that we can experience is when there is a sudden gap in leadership, if someone retires or moves or changes agencies. So we want to be thinking intentionally about what we're doing to cultivate leadership both as a department in the state agency and also in our provider agency community. And lastly, on here you see employer engagement, which of course represents the business side of the equation of employment, which is thinking about how we are engaging in authentic ways with the business community. And one of the most recent additions that we made to that strategy was our partnership with the Employment and Community Development Department of Tennessee. And then, of course, you see here that what's catalyzing this whole system is, of course, our employment first status and the Executive Order number 28, maintaining very high expectations across the board. And when I talked about being intentional about those outcomes, we need to be very specific about the fact that we are looking to increase the employment rate in our state for people with disabilities. We are looking to increase the average wage and the average number of hours worked, which also assumes, of course, that we have to have an effective way of capturing that data. So without further ado, I am going to now hand it over to Dwayne Webb, whom I have the pleasure of working with on a pretty regular basis, and he's going to share more about his perspective at the provider level.
Good afternoon and welcome to today's presentation. My name is Dwayne Webb and I'm the Director for Day and Employment Services at St. John's Community Services in Martin, Tennessee. It is an honor to be here today to share the success story of Mike McCory, a young man who I am truly proud of for his employment accomplishments. Representatives from Sodexo Dining Services, a global business that is deeply rooted in diversification, as it ranks in the top 10 of the 2016 Diversity Inc. survey. For anyone who may not be familiar with Diversity Inc., it is the leading assessment survey tool utilized to gauge the level of diversity management in corporate America and on a global scale. So that is truly an outstanding accomplishment for this organization. And lastly, two fellow colleagues and leaders in the field of intellectual and developmental disabilities who continue to pave the way for employment first in Tennessee and on a national scale. Amy and Jeremy, thank you very much for all that you do. To begin, I'd like to take a moment to provide a very brief overview of our organization from the corporate level and then provide a more detailed progression in regards to the steps we took in our provider transformation process. Since its historic founding in 1868, St. John's community-based activist approach has assisted people to fully participate in and become contributors to their chosen communities. Our mission reflects a commitment to advancing self-direction, full citizenship, and equal rights for people with disabilities. We currently provide a wide array of services for over 600 individuals in the form of employment, community participation, community living, and educational services in our Washington, D.C., Virginia, Pennsylvania, Tennessee, Delaware, and Maryland locations. Our strong support base of 816 full and part-time employees allows St. John's to carry out our mission of advancing community support and opportunities for people living with disabilities. So how did we get started with our transformation? The provider transformation process for our St. John's, Tennessee, Martin location developed out of sheer necessity. On July 1st, 2012, St. John's Community Services assumed operations from a financially failing provider agency that had been in business for the past 41 years. At the time, the agency provided facility-based service models in the form of a sheltered workshop facility and a traditional rehabilitation center. Now, you can imagine the apprehensiveness felt throughout our company regarding someone new assuming the reins from our longstanding organization, which had always been known to provide quality care and services to the individuals and families we serve. That concern was heightened even more when it was discovered that everything we'd ever known regarding service delivery models was about to change, because St. John's didn't believe in operating any facility-based services. So obviously, being that we were at opposite ends of the spectrum regarding how services should be provided, we had to come up with a game plan on how to make this transformation a reality. We approached our organizational transformation by diligently assessing 6 key elements on a step-by-step basis that we felt would be crucial in ensuring that we were ready for true systems transformation at all the levels necessary to be successful. These included establishing our identity, setting our vision, creating a plan, bringing our stakeholders along, implementing the plan, and collecting the data and sharing our stories. The first of these steps requires you to take a long, hard look at yourself in the mirror and determine what truths you believe in and what you will build your organizational platform upon. What is going to be your identity? It may require you to dismantle every aspect of your organization, right down to even your name, as you prepare to move into fully integrated employment and community-based service models. For example, our former company's name started with community, but the services we provided in the sheltered workshop and rehabilitation center sure did not reflect that aspect. Both of these locations were isolated and offered little to no community inclusion and involvement. St. John's truly believes in operating 100% in the community and providing real-world settings for people to learn and grow. Many years ago, they decided as an agency that separating people from their communities would not help them prepare for a full and meaningful adult life. So they sold off all their buildings, reinvested that revenue back into the areas that needed to be strengthened within the new service models, and moved out into the community to provide services. If you think about that, it's a very simple principle. We have all learned from our peers in our environment as we have grown. In addition, most, if not all of us, learn better from doing a task in a real-world setting rather than through a simulated one like a classroom. These experiences have led us into the career paths and life choices we've made for ourselves. The most important concept from this is that people have a right to be in their community, and our role as a provider agency is simply to support them. The second step to me, and the most important part of our transformation process, was establishing our core values of the organization. That will be the driving force behind everything that you do in regards to your service delivery. Too many times, organizations' core values are worth no more than the paper they're written on. They're just words. In order to be successful with organizational change, you must have buy-in from the very top of the food chain right down to the newest employee walking in the door. If you truly don't believe in what you're doing, then how can you expect to change anything? Everything that we do at St. John's is based off of our core values. We believe that everyone should have a career, have dreams for the future, and make meaningful contributions. Employment first. Be included, respected, and valued. This means being a part of things and having your opinion matter and being treated respectfully at all times. Having ongoing information, experiences, and expectations from which to make choices. This allows opportunities to develop skills and interests, which leads to career development. Have a wide array of relationships. Through work and being involved in one's community, we feel is the best way to develop those relationships. And lastly, to live and participate in the community of his or her choice, which again is drastically impacted through the financial security gained through work. These core values are what our staff keep in mind when supporting individuals in employment and community participation activities. The next key element comes in regards to creating the plan of action. How will you develop your services to meet the benchmarks established in your mission and core value statements? And what benefit do these measures bring to everyone involved? This is where the rubber starts to meet the road, and you need to be able to sell the why aspect to all your stakeholders. You also have to determine if you can actually deliver on and financially sustain what you are proposing. St. John's determined that our services will be formatted around the following measures. All activities would be conducted 100% in the community. No St. John's facilities are operated that would separate people with disabilities from their communities. That staff would accompany individuals to pre-planned activities in the community to conduct skill training, no van therapy, that our staff-to-individual ratios would be no greater than 1 to 3, that all activities would be chosen by the individuals and reflective of their interest and choice, and that all activities would be close to the individual's home, thus no more long commutes on vans. So what benefit does this newly created plan of action bring to the individuals? And does it meet the core values that we set for ourselves? For us, it allowed for connections with the community and relationships for social outlets. It provided the opportunity to explore different types of community resources, build skills, and develop a strong resume for future work. It gave individuals the chance to contribute to the community and build confidence, a sense of self-worth, and shared responsibilities with other community members. And it allowed for greater independence and interdependent relationships through the development of community access skills and cultural interests. As we started to move the individuals out into the community and truly begin to provide them with the opportunities to grow and develop, they were bombarded with real-life experiences, newfound information and expectations from which they were now able to make informed choices as it pertained to their career goals and aspirations. This, in turn, led us to take a deeper look into the discovery process, which we utilized to develop the skill sets that we ultimately translated into successful job placements. And on the other side of that coin, what benefits did the newly created plan bring to the community? For the community, it meant getting to know people with disabilities often as a first-time experience for community members. It increased the available pools of individuals available for nonprofits who depended on volunteerism and businesses looking for skilled labor. It provided the opportunity for communities to see people with disabilities as contributors rather than often needing contributions. And lastly, it provided a chance for new generations to grow up with people with disabilities, thereby increasing acceptance and understanding of diversity. Regardless of how good of a plan you have created, it's going to mean absolutely nothing if you cannot maintain a workable margin to carry out your operations. This will require you to take a hard look at every aspect of your organization to financially support the transformation process. It will require you to analyze business trends, external opportunities, internal resources, and core competencies to maximize every resource at your disposal. One of the biggest and most impactful resources you have at your disposal is your staff. At the onset of transforming our services, St. John's evaluated the personnel it had acquired. They strategically repositioned personnel into key management roles, modifying their previous job descriptions to meet the core competencies of the organization. They then mentored, empowered, and held accountable those personnel to meet the financial demands necessary to carry out system changes. We met bi-weekly to discuss relevant issues and to report on each department's current situation as it pertained to internal matters of control in order to operate more effectively and efficiently in the new service environment. Some other factors when it comes to maintaining your margin may pertain to how you braid your services to maximize funding and how you look into potential opportunities for untapped revenue pockets as they line up with your operational mindset and strengths. The primary funding source that we utilized during our transformation process came from the incentives that our own DIDD rate system provided regarding service delivery. Employment and community participation services offered the largest financial benefit when compared to segregated environments like our sheltered workshop and day rehabilitation center. We also generated revenue through our letter of agreement with Tennessee Vocational Rehabilitation Services when we provided employment supports that met milestone benchmarks. We accessed local county and grant funding streams. We grew fundraising efforts. We looked at selling off and utilizing the buildings that once held facility-based structures or residential services as potential new sources of revenue. And we obtained outside grants to provide specific training opportunities which targeted staff development in organizational core competencies and job development. So now that you've created this plan to change everything that everybody's known over the past 41 years, how do you address the concerns the stakeholders will have, because there will be pushback? What are the reasons for this resistance? Simply put, people tend to be creatures of habit. They like to have their security blankets in place because they have a fear of the unknown that generates concerns about one's own competency levels. We had to analyze the concerns in the minds of the families, the individuals, and our employees by getting down to the real root of the issue by answering one simple question: how does this affect me? The question itself may have been simple, but the answers were far more complex. So how did we achieve this? You achieve this by having conversations that matter. You know you just can't go wrong with open and honest communication. This was established day one by our leadership team. They brought forth a message that was reassuring and confident in nature, and it was disseminated to all our stakeholders as well as the community to reassure everyone that services would move forward and have a positive impact on those involved. We came to the table with anyone who wanted to talk about the changing of services. We did this in one-to-one conversations, group discussions, phone calls. It didn't matter. We were here 24/7 and available. We gave people the opportunity to express their thoughts, good or bad, and in turn tried to explain why we were rendering services in this manner by painting a picture of what true community integration would look like for their family member. We further offered opportunities for people to take tours of our services, engage in trial program experiences to show what would change and what not would change with the new employment and wraparound services of community participation. We sought feedback from the community and stakeholders on a regular basis to measure the levels of satisfaction in efforts to correct any areas of concern before they manifest into bigger obstacles. By maintaining ongoing contact, we further enhanced and established a true sense of trust, letting staff, families, and individuals know we as an organization was in this together. We also conducted ongoing training and professional development with our employees on a curved learning scale to strengthen their skill set and to build a strong sense of confidence as it pertained to our new service models and organizational objectives. So what were some of the lessons we took away regarding overcoming that resistance and ensuring that the plan that we wanted to implement was in place and carried out to the standards we had set? We learned that change was continuous and that you had to be able to adapt to survive. That by empowering our employees to be creative in looking for opportunities that match the interests, skills, and abilities of the individuals, we were able to build a sense of ownership, which then led to complete buy-in. We learned real quick that laying a solid foundation would be the groundwork for our success and transformation. That by raising the bar of expectation, we brought about higher work standards. One of the most important things is that you most definitely had to have a backbone and remain firm and committed in your mission, because you will be tested by your employees, by the individuals, and by the families, and by the community. And that you always had to remember to remain positive. Organizational transformation is a marathon and not a sprint. We began our journey with 103 individuals on July 1st, 2012. As we started focusing our efforts on training, reallocating current resources, and establishing community recreation and nonprofit volunteer sites to begin real-world skill training. In 2013, we were asked to join the Employment First Task Force with other key leaders in the state, which really gave us insight into how service delivery systems were evolving. In 2014, we began to pick up momentum as we started to build our resources and skill capacity. We rolled out our first pilot program that was 100% employment and community-based, thus transitioning individuals back to their home communities for services and supports. In 2015, we joined the EFSLMP grant, and later in August, we closed and transitioned services away from the Rehabilitation Center, further making our imprint in the community, as 33 more individuals entered into employment and/or community participation services. We completed our journey on July 1st, 2016, when we shut the doors to our sheltered workshop facility and fully shifted our services to 100% integrated employment and community participation supports. We've been able to build and maintain an employment program that currently consists of 47 individuals working in the community. Through each of these phases, we started to see the individuals' demeanors change as the new community-based programs evolved. The individuals were forming connections with the community for relationships and social outlets. They were given opportunities to explore different types of community resources to build skills and develop a strong resume for future work options. They finally had that chance to truly contribute to their community and build their confidence, a sense of self-worth, and shared responsibility with other community members. We've also been able to share our stories through the work of DID's Public Information Officer, Matthew Perriott. Matthew has filmed several videos throughout our conversion process, and the most powerful statement that can be made for change comes directly from the individuals he has filmed. Individuals who have spent 20 to 30 years in facility-based programs that are now able to speak to the friendships they formed in the community and to the opportunities they've been given now to truly make informed choices regarding their lives and careers. One of the most recent videos spotlights our guest speaker and his employer. I believe Jeremy has placed a link in the chat box, and it's in your resource page as well. So if you'd like to take a few minutes and watch Mike in action, it's available for your viewing. And with that, I will turn the discussion back over to Corey. Thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you very much, and that was a fantastic summary, both Joanne and Jeremy. Thank you for your insight in this topic. Now we'd like to turn. This is a great opportunity. I've had the pleasure and the privilege of working with Sodexo at a number of different points in my career, and I think Sodexo is one of the companies we can look at to really understand what it means when we say that the inclusion of diversity in a company's plan for hiring, for onboarding, for retaining employees, and for really developing employees isn't just a good feeling idea, it's a good business idea. And what we have the opportunity, and of course the idea that when we talk about diversity, we're of course including the notion of disability in that diversity, and that disability has to be a part of our employee base. So we have the opportunity today to speak with two managers with Sodexo, Ben Markey, who's the operations manager, and Jesse Kowalewski, who's the marketing manager. So we're just going to ask a couple questions, gentlemen. Thank you very much, and welcome to the webinar.
Thank you for having us.
Yes, appreciate it.
So can you tell me, how did you first meet Mr. McCrory, who we'll be talking to in a few minutes here?
I'll go ahead. I'll take that one first. This is Jesse. So I actually met Mr. Mike. He actually came in, and I was the one who actually got the chance to interview Mike, and I got to speak about all his experience that he had already gained. Mike told me that he was working for Burger King for 20-plus years. And, you know, I tell you, whenever an employee comes in and all they say is that I love to work and I can do the job, it's kind of like you gotta be able to trust in that person, and you know you're going to get the really good business from them.
All right, and this is Ben. I first met Mike, I believe his first day of work back in late August, early September, and the first thing that really jumped out about me is he has a great work ethic, a great personality, and he really bonded very quickly with our other employees. And, you know, it actually, you know, helped the spirits of our other employees that worked there for a while. They really enjoy working with Mike. Great personality, great work ethic, like I said.
Excellent. Thank you. How long have you worked with St. John's? When did you first meet them?
All right. This is Ben again. I first worked with St. John's probably going back to July of last year, and that's only because I was new to the area, and I understood there was a long relationship with Dwayne prior to that. And when I came in, he sort of came in to get to know me and the new management staff. And with that, I got to know Dwayne and what they were about. And I also have background in that field through my father, who does kind of a similar kind of job to what Dwayne does currently in upstate New York, where I'm from. So
we've actually had a working relationship with Sodexo for going on probably 22, 25 years. So it's been a wonderful partnership that we have had for numerous years, and it continues to grow. And we're excited about the future opportunities that can be had as the university grows, as Sodexo grows on the campus, and as we grow our employment program as well.
Great, great. And this is kind of a difficult question if we're talking about a 22-year-old relationship here, but maybe this is a question for Ben. What was your first impression when you started meeting Dwayne and other folks from St. John's? What kind of organization did it seem like to you?
It seemed like he had a very close-knit relationship with the clients. He also had a very close-knit relationship with myself, and he's very hands-on if I ever have an issue. I mean, he's on the spot. If I ever need anything, he's there. Or if I have a new job that opens up where I'm like, hey, Dwayne, do you think you have an individual who might be able to fit this? He's like right on top of it and says, oh, this would be a perfect job for this employee. And with that, it's great because sometimes you work with agencies on different things, whether it's marketing or anything, and sometimes you don't hear back for a month. So he's definitely someone who's very involved, and you can tell he generally cares because, you know, he'll come up anytime we need anything, whether it's the weekend or weekdays. So we've always had a great working relationship.
Great. And how has this relationship with St. John's, working with Mr. McCrory, how has this experience impacted your view of diversity as a topic? And by your view, I mean the view of the folks in your office, other managers, yourselves. How has it kind of influenced the way you think about that word diversity?
So, as you know, I know it was mentioned kind of in the beginning of the call, but Sodexo itself, the company in general, is, you know, ranked in the top 5 of diversity the last 5 years just as a company in a whole. And so our company in general is always striving just to make sure that diversity, like you said, in the sense of the word, is just growing and expanding as big as it can. And something that's great, like you mentioned, like if you take it down into just our business, so just where we are at UT Martin Dining Services and our diversity, and our employees and everybody working together, and I think we're really taking over what the word diversity means in general, because we are taking, you know, residents and people who live in this community from all aspects and all backgrounds, and we're coming together, and we're actually providing, I know just from my standpoint, from the marketing side, our national surveys that Sodexo, we conduct one every single semester. And every single year, the friendliness of our staff, it's maxed out at 99. And I can verify that, especially for some of our employees like Mike. You know, the students know that these individuals are very special, and they are the ones that greet you every single morning. They're the ones that tell you good morning, no matter if it's rain or shine. And so the diversity level that we're getting and also incorporating with the students at the university is just unbelievable. It's such a great thing to see, too.
That's great. Thank you very much. We live in we're very happy with the notion that I think more and more companies, more and more employers are understanding the benefits of hiring individuals with disabilities, just as they look to every other aspect of this diversity in their hiring. But if you were speaking with a colleague in the field, someone who didn't have a lot of experience with this, and they were talking about considering hiring individuals with disabilities but not having a lot of experience or background, what would your advice to them be? How would you tell them about what your experience has been?
I would say, develop a good relationship with whoever that individual is that's like Dwayne here at St. John's, and, understand what you're looking for as far as, are you looking for a cook or someone to clean tables or whatever it may be. And, if they have any reservations to that, I would say, their employees are some of the most dedicated employees. They're always on time. They never call out. If there's an issue, I know months ahead of time, like, hey, this day they may need off. And the biggest thing that I look for is their ability to follow through on some of their promises, which is like, all right, we're going to have a job coach up there every day. And I see that with St. John's. If, Mike's working up there, I see the job coach come in and he's working with him. And, if you're going to work with an agency, you're going to, need that support from them. And we've definitely received that, tenfold, and any issues I've ever had, I can go to the job coach and say, hey, this is an area we need to look at, and it's pretty much fixed that day, and I don't tend to have the same issues repetitively. And by issues, I'm not saying that they're huge or anything. They're just small things that, come with the employment, but I would say the benefits far outweigh any of the negatives, if there even is any. So I haven't seen any in my time.
Okay, great. Thank you. And final question for now, although I'm sure there'll be a bunch of questions as we move into the more general question and answer phase here. And you touched on this somewhat, but I just want to give you one more chance to talk about this. There are definitely a lot of employment service providers and employment service providing agencies in the audience today. So what should they know about providing the best possible customer service to a company like Sodexo? And even more than that, like, what should they know before the first time, as they're preparing, before the first time they even pick up the phone to call someone like you, what should they know and how should they prepare to be the best possible, to provide the best possible customer service? And I don't know, gentlemen, you might be on mute. Well, oh, yep. Now I hear you. Yep.
Okay. All right. Let me start over. So before they pick up the phone, they should look into what type of service, that company or that Sodexo account or Airmark or whatever it may be is into. With us, it's food service. Other areas of our business are in facilities management or housekeeping, and you're going to want to know the type of jobs that they have at those institutions. Here we offer food service, and we're strictly food service. Other Sodexo accounts may do facilities for the school, which basically means they're cleaning, doing kind of janitorial work, those kind of things. So knowing the types of jobs that we have and fitting those to the individuals is definitely something that, as a manager, I look at and I say, hey, Dwayne, do you have an individual that could fit this kind of job or this kind of job? And, he's pretty good at finding them pretty quickly, and he says, this person has this background for years, which is another thing to look at, is how many years an individual has been working in a certain field. That definitely helps them transition into our account. I know with Mike, he already had worked in food for a number of years, which gave him maybe a little bit of a jump on another employee. But I think we currently employ upwards of 10 individuals in different areas, from cleaning, tables to dish room to cooking to working a salad station. So, knowing the diversity of our jobs that we offer and being able to fit the individuals to those is something that I would encourage people to look into before you go to the manager or whatever account it may be and say, all right, I have these individuals and I know you do this kind of work, and I feel like they'd be a great fit for those kind of jobs because they've done this in their past. And it's worked out very well with our account.
And then something I just want to tack on right there at the end, it's, it goes to show all you have to do is literally just make the call. If you have a if you have an account that you have in mind, or if you're needing to become or start that relationship, just don't hesitate, because just from our perspective and the students' perspective and the university's perspective, our employees that we have, they are, if at ever times that they are off that certain day, I mean, people can tell. These are the type of employees that are, like Ben mentioned, they're so dependable, they're there on time every single day, and then not to mention just the attitude they bring with them, it's just over the top. And that's something, especially working with, students at a university, it's that thing that, these students sometimes need that pick-me-up. They need that customer service. So don't be afraid to contact that company that you're looking for, because the service that you are providing and the individuals that we get to work with, it's kind of a life-changing event that is provided. So it's such a wonderful relationship that you can get started. So don't be afraid to contact that employer.
All right, that's great. Thank you both very much. And like I say, I'm sure we're going to get some additional questions through the Q&A, the general Q&A section at the end here. But for now, and thank you again, I'm going to hand it back over to Dwayne. And Dwayne, you can introduce us to Mike McCrory, and the two of you can tell us about his work.
All right, thank you, Corey. It is my honor and my pleasure to introduce you to a young man who I am very proud of his work accomplishments, and that is Mr. Mike McCrory. How you doing today, Mike? Good. I'll get this a little closer where we can hear you good there. Mike, can you tell me what your current job title is at Sodexo?
I'm a cook.
You're a cook. So what does that entail? Can you tell me some of the things that you're known for there at the college?
Cheeseburgers, quesadillas, French fries, and grilled cheese sandwiches.
Oh, so you're pretty good at working that grill, huh? What are some of your other responsibilities? I know a lot of times I see you with, you have, looks like thermometers and stuff like that. What are you doing with those things?
Temporary meat and stuff.
So you're responsible for some of the health and safety aspects of what goes on there as well. That's outstanding. Can you tell me a little bit about what you were doing, Mike, before you started at Sodexo? Where did you spend the majority of your day Monday through Friday at?
Burger King.
And then you also was somewhere else. Where was that location?
Oh, at the workshop.
At the workshop. What were some of the things that you did at the workshop?
Sacks, quarter pads, and...
But those are just limited contracts that you worked on there. So you've had the experience, Mike, of being in a sheltered facility in regards to a workshop setting, and now you have the opportunity to work 6 days a week at Sodexo. What do you prefer better? Do you prefer what you're seeing in your current career path? Do you like that better than what you used to be doing?
I like it.
Okay, and what's one of the big factors to that?
Money.
Well, I think all of us like
money.
I think all of us like the aspect of honest pay for honest work. So that's outstanding. What interests you in becoming a cook, Mike?
I was cooking at home with Thorwood and helping everybody in the kitchen. So
you kind of got started just doing a little cooking around the house, and it kind of led into some different explorations. That's outstanding. That's outstanding. So in your job process to get to Sodexo, how did we here at St. John's assist you in getting this job? What did we do for you to help you there?
I got the proper training. Foreign employment got me the proper training and interviewed and worked.
Good deal. But in essence, who landed the job when it's all said and done?
I did.
That's right, you did. We're very proud of you for that. Can you tell me how your life has been different, Mike, since you started working with Sodexo?
I like the students and employees and staff and everybody.
Have you made any new friends?
Met a lot of them.
That's outstanding. That's outstanding. Mike, if you had the opportunity to talk to someone that's listening today and they were kind of thinking about getting a job in the community for the very first time, what advice would you give them?
Get a job of that light and take advantage of it.
That's exactly right. Take advantage of it. I appreciate that, Mike. Is there anything else that you'd like to share that we may not have asked in regards to what you're doing, or you think we nailed it pretty much on the head?
You does it pretty much on the head.
All right. That sounds like a good thing. All right, Corey, I think Mr. McCory is done with his questions here, so we'll turn it back over to you.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, and I wouldn't be surprised if there are some additional questions from the Q&A as well. So I'll start into the Q&A section now, and I'm sure folks see on your interface that there is a Q&A bar there. We do have quite a few questions already coming in. We're going to try and get to, of course, as many as we possibly can. So I'll dive right in here with a question for Jeremy, and maybe Dwayne, you'd have some insight on this as well. So as you're working with providers who are in this transformation process, but they really feel like they need to hold on to some aspect of a sheltered workshop, that, okay, we'll be pushing for folks to be transitioning into the community, but we really feel that we need to hold on to that service to some degree just as we're moving forward. What is your response to those providers, and what advice would you give them?
Jeremy,
I can give my 2 cents on it. Yeah, sure. I'll give my 2 cents, and then I'd be curious to hear what you think about that, Dwayne. So I have this conversation a lot with providers and person-supported and all sorts of different folks. And one of the things I've learned is that we have 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason, because I think it's important to listen twice as much as we talk. So, you know, what I always like to do is approach that conversation just first of all learning about the history of that workshop and what role it's played for people's lives over the years. And so I'd say one of the things I do with providers especially is I'd like to understand what role that workshop plays for them, why it has been so important, what purpose it has served for the people that they support, you know, whether it is vocational training, whether it's community with their friends, whether it's safety, whether it's convenience in terms of transportation. And every workshop's going to have a different set of answers. So first things first, I'd like to understand what role that workshop has played over the years and continues to play, which I think will influence sort of the fear or trepidation that a provider might feel about letting go of those workshop services. And so once we narrow down on what the role that it's played, then I like to sit down and collaboratively think about if there might be other ways that we can achieve those same things, those same purposes in a slightly different way. So, for example, if it has to do with convenience and transportation, you know, what sort of transportation innovations are we coming up with? What sort of transportation partnerships are we coming up with? If it's a matter of community and friendships, that is an impetus for us to think about ways that person is forming and maintaining friendships in their communities, whether it's at home, at work, and elsewhere. If it has to do with safety, I think that's a really legitimate conversation that we can have about mitigating risk and you know, having that tension between the dignity of risk but also wanting to be very safe at the same time. So I guess my answer there would be that it depends on the provider and it depends on the role that it has played over time. And the more that you can understand about why that workshop's been important to folks, the easier it will be to brainstorm potential solutions as they transition more toward community services. And Dwayne, I'd love to hear what you think about that question as well.
Well, and I agree 100% with you, Jeremy. I mean, our workshop was in operation for 31 years. So when you start to break down those walls and start moving individuals out into community integrated employment settings, then you're going to have a lot of questions and concerns that are going to come from your staff, from the management level to the direct care level, to the families, to the individuals. You know, they've grown accustomed to those services. And they've grown accustomed to, you know, having, if you will, a false sense of security inside a building structure like that. And what we had to do was ultimately start breaking down those barriers by peeling away the layers just like you would an onion and get to the final, you know, aspect of it is, you know, how's this going to affect me as an individual, as a staff person, as a family member, and we had to even answer that in the community regards because, you know, it becomes such a staple for so many years in a small rural area that when, you know, we started talking about transition, you're closing the workshop. Well, we're not closing, we're transitioning our services to something better, and that's how we try to portray that. We approached our closure of our workshop you know, methodically, we had a lot of in-house contract works that we'd had for many, many years, some 20, upwards of 30 years that we'd had at that location. The way that we moved away finally from piecework rate was simply drawing a line in the sand and going to those vendors and saying, as of July 1, we will no longer provide this service to you. We are fully integrated in the community. The individuals have proven that they can do the job tasks that you have asked them to do on a piecework rate. It's now time for you to step up and hire the individuals directly into your companies. And we saw a lot of companies that we had done work with do that very thing. And then we had some companies, you know, that we had always met the timelines for and the deadlines for, that when it came time for them to step up and bring those individuals in as skilled labor, they opted a different route. And, you know, but we're okay with that because, you know, we want the very best for the individual, and we know that for us and for what our mission and our values stand for, that's 100% inclusion in the community. That is customizing competitive employment, and that's making sure every individual has a meaningful day.
All right. Thank you, gentlemen, very much. I'm going to do another question here that's probably great for both Jeremy and Dwayne to give their perspective on. Can you talk about the role of the Department of Labor, specifically the workforce development system in Tennessee? How is that related to the ongoing employment first efforts? And again, but Jeremy, if you can talk about that from the state perspective, and then Dwayne, if there are any partnerships you can talk about on an organizational level, that'd be great.
Sure, I can touch on that real briefly and then see if Dwayne's got anything to add to it. So the first thing I'd say is that when I talked earlier about getting the right people at the table or getting the right people on the bus, that includes our workforce system, our Department of Labor and Workforce Development. And that's one of those things that's easy to overlook. You know, we've got so many different state agencies working in different directions, whether it's my department, DIDD, whether we're talking about vocational rehabilitation, Department of Labor, you name it. We're all in some way, shape, or form involved in employment initiatives, and one of the dangers there is that we totally overlook a potential partnership. So I'd say, first things first, make sure that your Department of Labor is at the table, having those conversations, understanding what resources they have available, and chances are some of the things that you're trying to address can be much more easily addressed if you have them at the table. Obviously, easier said than done. This is still a work in progress for us. Our Department of Labor is at the table, but it is still an ongoing conversation about how we collaborate and what sort of things we can do together. One example of that is how we can access and utilize data about employment rates, about industries. And so I think that's a real ripe area for collaboration, is thinking about which industries tend to be hiring folks with disabilities. I'm thinking about if there's enough diversity in which industries are hiring them. I think there also is potentially a lot of data in there about employment rates, and if there are particular counties or cities across the state that have higher or lower success rates than others. And then once you have that rich data information, you're actually able to strategize, you know, which counties that you want to work more closely with, or which cities that you want to examine to understand why they're being successful. So I would say, number one, make sure that they're at the table, and then number two, look at areas for potential collaboration, especially around data sharing for individuals who are working and the businesses who hire employees.
Well, and we're excited, too, with some of the initiatives that are coming out. It's opening the doors for us to start working with individuals coming out of school systems at a much earlier age than what we once were able to do. So we're excited about some of the opportunities that we have moving forward on the employment front in those regards.
Great. Thank you. This is a question I'd like to direct first to the folks at Sodexo, and then Jeremy, Dwayne, of course, any additional input you have, please chime in. The question really comes down to how do, if I'm a service provider, how do I go out, engage businesses, really enlist them in this notion of hiring people with disabilities, particularly even employers, as Dwayne was talking about, employers who may previously have had a relationship with the sheltered workshop and used some kind of piecemeal contract. How do you go out and engage employers with this notion of competitive integrated employment, potentially even customized employment? And let's start with Sodexo, and really from your perspective, how you as the business, what's the best way to reach out to you and start building a partnership with you folks?
All right. I think, going in person is big, and bringing information with you to say, look, here's what my company is about. Here's what we do. We've been doing this for however many years, and I have a lot of individuals that meet the criteria for some of the jobs that you have here. If you have openings, I'd be more than happy to have them. Sit down and give them an interview and see what you think. And then you can also gauge, I'd like to say that all management is responsible and open-minded, but sometimes that's not the case. And like Dwayne said, if you have a manager at a company, you're looking to put somebody in, and you just don't feel comfortable or they're not on board with it, I would say not to push the issue with that company, because you don't want to put that individual in a situation where they're not supported by management. I think that's probably the worst thing that could happen, is to not have the support of their bosses in what they do. I feel like it could open up a lot of issues, and you're going to want to look for companies that are on board with the idea. And I know that can be hard to change their minds, but if you can bring information and what the company is about and individuals that can meet the criteria for the jobs, and take time and sit down with that manager, I think it'll definitely go a long ways. And like I said, it'd be the same on whoever's going out for that, is to also judge the management staff there. If they feel like it's a good fit and they feel like, all right, this manager is going to take care of the individuals that come here, and that's just as important. And from my perspective as a manager, I want to make sure that these guys are successful here. I wouldn't want to hire somebody and just to have them fail. So I would look in that area of management and bringing relevant information that backs up your argument for hiring those individuals.
One thing that we do try to do our due diligence on in anything that we do, obviously we believe in it as employment first is the first and preferred outcome for the individuals, because it offers the most benefits to that individual. But we also do our due diligence in regards to really carving out positive personal profiles of each individual that works with us in our organization, to ensure that the job placements that we move forward with are going to be sound fits for the individual and for the business. We do want a win-win situation for that business, because the business is gaining a skilled labor personnel. It's gaining somebody that brings value to that company's bottom line. In the same token, we want to make sure that the individuals that we place are placed in positions that they want to be in, that they have a career interest in, and that also can open up the doors for further growth and development, whether within that company or within another entity inside that field. I think a lot of that comes back, whether you're looking at a customized or competitive employment role, it comes back to your role as an employment provider to ensure that you're doing everything that you feasibly can to place the individuals in those career paths that are one person, one job related, and not done so in a manner that just fits somebody in a job because that's what you have available at the current time.
And I would just say ditto to everything those gentlemen just said, and just sum up my perspective in 2 key points. And the first one is that in my experience, and I used to be a job developer, so I ran into this firsthand, and that is that businesses really just want to hire good employees. So it's all about how you make that business case and be approaching a business from that perspective of we're not doing this work because it's about charity or it's not about feeling good necessarily, but when we're approaching businesses, it's about making that strong business case. And then number 2, I would say that the less people know, the more they make up. And that's a saying you've probably heard before, and it's one of my favorites. And so if people don't know what it means to hire people with disabilities, or if we're not actively engaging people and informing and educating and cultivating buy-in, then people are going to have their own ideas and perceptions and possibly misperceptions about what it means to hire inclusively and hire people with disabilities. So I think it's incumbent upon us to take that challenge very seriously and to make sure that people aren't having to make anything up or to have any misperceptions, but rather that they have proactively received information from us. So I would just agree with everything that Dwayne and Sodexo just said.
Great. Thank you all very much. Next question I want to direct to the folks at ODEP, to Amy Gonzalez and her colleagues. The question is this: what we need is more technical information surrounding what to consider when transforming services. Do you have any suggested resources? I'll say first, we are going to attach a number of great resources to this. There'll be a slide, and then when they archive the webinar, there'll be further information there. So there are some great resources. But Amy, could you tell us about some more resources that might be helpful in this?
Yes, I can. So in April, ODEP plans to release a provider transformation manual that's going to contain a wealth of resources. The manual is divided up into modules and addresses transformation from a holistic perspective. Our plan is to share the resource broadly so that it can be used nationally. And so more details will be forthcoming, but please keep a lookout for that resource.
Great. Thank you very much. Here's a question about staff training. Of course, there are a lot of new skills that are involved when a provider makes this move from a more sheltered services into community-based and employment-driven services. So, starting with Dwayne, can you talk about some specific strategies you implemented to assist in developing your staff's the skill sets amongst your staff and managers for this?
Well, sure. And, you know, one of the things that just jumps off the page at me is we had an opportunity through Tennessee to hear a grant that enabled us to go to Detroit, Michigan to the first APSE From Workshop to Workplace conference. It was an opportunity that we utilized to take two of our most tenured employees, 22 and 23 years respectively, that all they'd ever known is a workshop setting, and have them go to a training conference where they were able to hear from subject matter experts and others in the field about what was coming and some of the techniques and how to apply this. Another aspect that we've utilized is strictly the sheer history of our agency. Our agency has been around for 147 years. We started providing community and employment services back in the late 80s. So, I mean, this is something that our company has known for quite some time. For us, coming in 2012 under the umbrella of St. John's, we kind of had a blueprint already in place in regards how our staff should be able to provide training that would be acceptable to meet the demands in a fully integrated setting such as employment and community participation. But we've taken advantage of every opportunity that we possibly can, whether it be on a national level, whether it be internally, and we're constantly looking at growing and honing the skill sets of our staff to provide the ultimate services for the individuals that we have.
Great. Thank you. Jeremy, did you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, thanks, Corey. And if you recall the slide that I shared about the framework for department systems change, you remember that one of the key areas was capacity building, and we know that's incredibly important. And as Dwayne talked about, there are a lot of different specific strategies that each of the providers are doing. We think a lot about what sort of initial training job coaches and job developers have access to through our department. We have a system called Relias so that there's some initial training that they can go through. We want to encourage as many folks as possible to take advantage of training through places like APSE, through ACRE, to attain the CESP accreditation through APSE, I believe that is. So just kind of thinking about what resources not only are available, but how are we promoting them to people. And then the only other point I'd make is that we tend to think, and myself included, we tend to think of training as very kind of expensive, cost-prohibitive thing that, you know, if only I had $1 million, then I could go to all these fancy trainings. And that is true. Good trainings are often expensive. However, I think there's a lot of resources and strategies, some of them that Dwayne talked about, that don't cost you anything except time and energy. You know, just shadowing folks who are successful, reaching out across the aisle, reaching out to other provider agencies in your community or across the state and learning from people who are already doing it successfully. So I think I would encourage folks to kind of take advantage of a lot of that grassroots capacity building that really, like I said, will only cost you time and energy, which are very valuable, but it doesn't require as much actual money.
Great, thank you. I've gotten a question from a number of different participants in the webinar related to how to engage families in this process and to enlist their support and their commitment to the transformation. I think, Dwayne, I'd like to start with you, but Jeremy, I'd like to hear your thoughts as well.
Well, you know, again, it goes back to what I said earlier about open and honest communication. I mean, you really don't need to come in when you're addressing families or individuals or your staff for that matter with smoke and mirrors. I mean, you need to come in, you need to sit down at the table, you need to talk about what is going on in the state of Tennessee and on a national level, and you need to be able to provide that information in a thorough manner and try to give families every opportunity to make a sound choice in what services they would like to see their family member have, and the same token do the same for that individual. We did that through, again, one-on-one conversations, phone calls, emails. You know, we tried to reach out to our families in open forums any way that we possibly could. We also encouraged our families to come and tour the program itself and to see what their son and daughter would be doing in a day-to-day capacity. Give it a trial run, you know, test the waters, if you will, with it. And what we were able to see is once families had an understanding of what you were trying to implement for their son and daughter, they were okay with that. They understood that this was a better service for their son and daughters. Now, you still had family members that were on the fence about things. You know, I remember sitting in an office having a conversation with a family about, you know, they knew their daughter of 39 years and this just wasn't going to work. And, you know, there's going to be behaviors and there's going to be this. The young lady now, you know, is very successful in the community. What you have to do as a provider is find what interests that individual and what you can do that's educational and beneficial for that individual. And when you do those things and you put forth that effort and you really craft the services around that individual's choice and preference, then you really start to see success come in. And if the individual is happy with what they're doing, the family is happy with what they're doing. And, you know, the families want the very best for their sons and daughters, just like we do as a provider agency. We have ongoing communications with our individuals, with our family. We plan everything out on a week, on a month basis, and we ensure that those services being rendered are exactly what the individuals and families are looking for.
Great. And Jeremy, anything to add to that?
Well, I would just say that from the state perspective, we know that providers like Dwayne and others are uniquely and powerfully positioned to be interacting with families and individuals on these sort of topics. And so anything that we can do as a state to support providers in that endeavor. And so there's a lot of different ways we can do that, and we've done a lot of them. One of the things we'll do is we will always make ourselves available. And I speak personally, I will always make myself available to attend family meetings, board meetings, you know, any sort of venue where families and individuals and community members are gathering. If they want and need more information, sort of like the thing I said about the less you know, the more you make up, if they're needing access to more information, or if they're just needing a sounding board, someone to listen to what their fears are, their aspirations, their hopes for the future, then we will make ourselves available to support the provider in that way. So I think it really requires a strong partnership between the provider agencies and the state to make sure that it doesn't become an us versus them situation, but rather we're all on the same team. We might not always see eye to eye, but we're always on the same team, and we believe that the more information that you have access to, the better, and the more that we're able to listen to and understand your hopes and fears, the more we'll be able to brainstorm collaboratively about the future.
Okay, great. Thank you. I'm going to try and fit in one more question here that I think I'd like to hear from the folks at Sodexo. Jesse and Ben, I'd like to hear from Dwayne as well. Someone wrote an saying that they have been successful as a provider agency in developing some employment placements, some good employer relationships, but they're having employers ask that the job coach, the staff person that works with the individual in question, that they stay on and are present with the employee at all times. So how do we address that question of saying, okay, the job coach is there to provide some support, but they should be transitioning out, and ultimately this relationship should be between an employee and an employer, and that job coach should be able to transition out of that relationship.
All right. As an employer, we always look for, you know, these individuals, of course, when they start are going to have, you know, the job coach there for the first couple of days, but we really look for them to develop independently into their role, and they've done that pretty successfully here with the job coaches that are with St. John's. And they do check in with them, you know, a couple times a week, but for the most part, these individuals are pretty independent. Once they get down the job and what's expected and what they got to do, you know, you can sort of step back and they can really handle it on their own, I've found, in a lot of cases. Sometimes it just takes you know, a couple extra days of training, but in the long run, it definitely is worth it because they're dependable, they show up all the time, they're never late, and they just look to please because, you know, for someone who's worked for Sodexo for 3 years, I've seen immense growth in their confidence by being independent, and I think, you know, having the job coach always there would be a hindrance to that because they're always going to ask them, am I doing this right or that right? And sometimes the best way to learn is on their own.
And one thing that we do with our job coaches is we look to faith. I mean, that's the primary ticket of what we try to do. We want to provide just the right amount of supports for that individual to be successful in his or her job selection. We're always going to be there to offer supports when needed to the individual and or to the business. But what we also want to do, and what we have been able to do with Sodexo, is establish those natural supports within the working facility that enable the individuals, instead of turning to a paid support, are now able to turn to a fellow coworker and get that extra assistance that they need to be successful. And by doing that, again, that creates further independence for that individual and for the business, for that matter.
Okay, great. Well, it looks like we have just another couple minutes here, so I'm going to ask one more question that I think will be pretty quick. Would any of the presenters have a sample strategic plan to share which moves from a sheltered workshop to community employment for all individuals supported? I know we are already sharing the strategic plan that Jeremy was talking about that's from the state perspective, but I wanted to ask Dwayne, do you have any resources like that folks could refer to that we could potentially share?
You know, if I had the blueprint to provider transformation, you know, that'd be a gold mine right now. Every provider, whether you're in a rural area, whether you're in a metropolis area, you know, every provider is going to have growing pains that are going to be different from the other providers in question. The 6 fundamental elements that I addressed during my presentation, you know, it's something that no matter who you are going through a transformation process, you're going to have to address those components. You're really going to have to look at things from a budgetary standpoint, a staffing capacity standpoint, the buy-in standpoint from the very top of the food chain on down. You know, there are, you know, a rough skeleton draft of kind of how to go about provider transformation. But, you know, hand somebody the keys and say, here it is, you know, that's really kind of going to be unique to each and every provider that's out there, to the population of individuals that they serve, to the geographical location that they work out of. I would be more than happy to assist any provider that has a question or any, you know, self-advocate, whoever, in regards to how to make this work. They could feel free to reach out to me, and I'll offer any assistance that I possibly can. You know, we've had to learn through trial and error, and we still learn. Just because you get everything closed down and transformed doesn't mean you stop learning and growing, and we're still doing that. We still experience some growing pains along the way because we're fairly new to this. Again, July 2016 is when we closed the door, so we're still learning as we go, but we have made the biggest hurdle and have met that guideline of being 100% out in the community, and like I say, I'll be more than happy to offer any assistance I can to anybody.
Great. Thank you very much, and I would not be surprised if folks take you up on that. I will simply close out my piece by saying, Mike, Jesse, Ben, Jeremy, Dwayne, thank you all so much for your time and participation. Thanks very much to the audience members. I hope you enjoyed this as much as we have, and I will hand it back over to Rebecca to close us out.
you that there are links to some of the resources that the presenters talked about, as well as provider transformation issue brief. On the next slide is reference to 4 Employment First technical assistance briefs, and there's a live link that you'll be able to get them. And that we wanted to highlight that we've archived a webinar from last week on the role of interagency coordination in securing competitive integrated employment for transition, and we have an upcoming webinar in April on the ABLE Act, which is a wonderful new resource as a tool to encourage people to work and to gain financial stability. So there's a link there so that you can sign up and register for it. Our last slide gives you all the ways that you can connect to the LEAD Center. I don't know if anyone from ODEP wanted to say any final words in the minute that we have left. No, maybe not. Okay. Well, in that case, I just want to thank everyone for participating and this. Oh, I'm sorry.
Hello, I'm sorry. We were having some technical difficulties. This is Amy Gonzalez, and we just wanted to thank all of the panelists and everyone for participating in the webinar today. We appreciate the questions and the rich dialogue, and we hope that persons on the webinar take what they learned and apply it in the field. So thanks to everyone, and thanks to the LEAD Center. Have a wonderful afternoon.
Thank you.